Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Craig Hickman. I represent Senate District 14, 11 towns in Southern Kennebec County, including my hometown of Winthrop. Today, we have 3 public hearings, and a slew of work sessions, up to 15. We may not get to all of them today for people attendance, but we will begin shortly. First, let us commence with committee introductions, beginning with Representative Bradstreet today.
Good morning. I'm Representative Dick Bradstreet from House District 80, and that's comprised of Vassalboro, Windsor, Somerville, and part of Augusta.
Senator Guerin.
Good morning. I am Senator Stacey Guerin, representing Southern Penobscot County.
Representative Rader.
Good morning. My name is Amy Rader. I represent District 125, which is a portion of Bangor.
Senator Miramont.
Good morning. Dave Miramont, Senator for Senate District 12, which is Knox County, except the town of Washington. County seat is Rockland.
Representative Cuddy.
Good morning. My name is Scott Cuddy. I represent House District 98, which is Winterport, Frankfort, Searsport, and Swanville.
Representative Drinkwater.
Good morning. I represent District 121. Thank you.
Representative Gear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Tracy Gear. I represent House District 9, which is Kennebunkport and Coastal Biddeford and Kennebunk.
And Chairman Sylvester.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Representative Mike Sylvester. I represent District 39, which is the Eastern Peninsula portion of Portland. And the surprised as heck it isn't raining folks of Casco Bay. And I am the House Chair. I will be doing timing during the public hearings. And so as you commence to speak, we have 3 minutes. I'm going to hold up my phone. When we get to the end of the 3 minutes, I'll gently nudge you to finish your thoughts. Thank you. And if you put your view in gallery view, you can see all of the committee and you'll be able to see my phone. Thank you.
And it looks like Representative Pebworth is in the process of joining us. Maybe there she is.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Pebworth. I represent House District 133 in the Blue Hill Peninsula.
Great. Again, we also have with us today our awesome committee clerk, Alyssa Thompson, and our fabulous committee analyst, Stephen Langland. Today's proceedings are being broadcast live and recorded on our YouTube channel. They are also being broadcast live on our audio recording on the legislature's website. Like I said, today we'll be having first 3 public hearings before the noon hour. If you are here to testify, please make sure that you are muted and your camera is off until you are admitted to the panelist room through the wormhole. For anyone attending, the chat box can only be used for technical issues, questions to the committee clerk about order of things, but please no comments to the committee or amongst each other about the bills that are in front of us or their substance. We will take the bills this morning in the order that they are listed. And so with that, I will open the public hearing on LD 610, an act to amend the laws governing employee recovery of overcompensation paid to an employee, presented by Representative Donna Dorr of Augusta.
I don't see Representative Dorr.
Okay.
If somebody has her number, I don't know, I'd be more than happy to call if somebody can chat it for me. If not, I can try to find it online, but it might be quicker.
Is Representative Collins here?
Representative Collins said he was going to be 5 minutes late. He's dropping the kids off at school, so he will be on momentarily.
This is a rare occurrence when we don't have our bill sponsors with us. Is Representative Wood here?
No.
Okay. So we will be at ease until we have a bill sponsor. Thank you.
Alyssa, I just sent you Representative Doer's number in the chat.
I was just starting to dial it. Okay, I'm resending her invite and she's getting her testimony together and then she will be right on.
Thank you, Alyssa.
So what is the appropriate fine that we levy for our tardy bill sponsors committee? Shall we take a vote?
I would like to suggest some sort of edible product such as a baked good.
Is there a second?
I would second that.
All in favor?
Although
And
wait, if it's a farmer involved, then I want peas, fresh eggs, or baby goats visiting.
Oh, baby goats. Yes, please.
Oh, I'll vote for baby goats. Support that.
The bill sponsors are farmers, so how's that? And Representative Doer doesn't have a co-sponsor. Representative Collins said he's on his way. And I have not heard from Representative Wood. Representative Sylvester, have you reached out to her?
I have not. I'm trying to track down. I only have a number that I did not get. I don't have a mobile number for her, so I'm trying to track that down right now.
Thank you. And we thank our 6 attendees for waiting patiently.
Good morning.
Good morning, Representative Dorr. Welcome to the Labor and Housing Committee. We have opened the public hearing on your bill. You may proceed.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, members of the Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Representative Donna Dorr, and I represent a portion of Augusta. I'm here today to introduce LD 61, an act to amend the laws governing employee recovery of overcompensation paid to an employee. And I apologize, in my introduction, it's I said LD 61, it's actually LD 610. My apologies. LD 610 was brought to my attention by a state employee who was overpaid $2,220 due to a payroll error. The employee did not think it was a mistake because he was due a pay step increase. Approximately in 6 months, it was determined the extra pay was not due to a step increase. Negotiation started with payroll, and they offered a settlement of half the overpayment, a total of $1,110.19, or 67 hours. The employee's options for payback were to have a lump sum taken out of each pay period, or to use his vacation time or comp time. This employee was fortunate to have enough vacation comp time to repay for this error. The bill that I'm presenting asks for a 5% recovery instead of 10% of overcompensation, and it limits the employer from only being able to recover their overpayment for a period of 3 years upon discovery of the overpayment. This bill does not limit or affect an employee's general civil remedies against an employer. Thank you for the opportunity to present this bill to you this morning, and I'm happy to answer or try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Representative Dorr. Are there any questions from the committee for the sponsor this morning? I do not see any hands raised. Thank you very much for presenting the bill. We will see you at the work session.
Thank you.
It looks like we have one person signed up to testify in favor of this bill, Mr. Joseph Gribben. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and members of the Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Joseph Gribben, and I'm a field representative from the Maine Service Employees Association, Service Employees International Union, Local 1989, otherwise known as MSEA-SEIU. MSEA-SEIU is a labor union that represents approximately 13,000 workers and retirees statewide. We urge you to support LD 610 today, which is an issue that has been worked on during both the 128th and 129th legislatures. During the 128th, the State and Local Government Committee heard 2 bills, the details of which I'll discuss below, and the language was presented in the 129th, or the language as presented in the 129th was what the committee sent to the full legislature. Unfortunately, the work was left incomplete during the 129th due to the quick adjournment of the legislature because of the pandemic. LD 610 would provide some relief to employees by amending the definition of overcompensation and changing the maximum amount an employer can withhold from an employee's pay to recover overcompensation from 10% to 5%. Currently, when an employee is unknowingly overcompensated by their employer, they can be required to repay their employer back by up to 10% of their net pay per pay period. This can present an undue burden to employees for a mistake that they had no part in making. Withholding 10% of an employee's wages, as you can imagine, if they're living paycheck to paycheck, can have an immediate financial hardship. The snapshot of a DOT worker that Representative Dorr mentioned, I'll also discuss as well, is a good example of what can happen. I'll be referencing LD 1257 testimony of Jack Olson, who is a resident of Vinyl Haven, to the State and Local Government Committee on April 19th of 2017. Quote, I was caught up in this unfortunate situation that this bill would address. I was overpaid a substantial amount of money, $2,220, due to a payroll error. I was eligible for a step increase, which was approved by my supervisor, manager, and received final approval in payroll. So I did not question the increase in my check. Approximately 6 months later, it was determined that I was not eligible for that pay increase due to a wage freeze, end quote. Thank you for your time and your consideration today. I would be happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability. And you're also welcome to direct any questions to MSEA SEIU's Director of Politics and Legislation, Jeff McCabe, if you have any other questions that he may be able to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Gribben.
Thank you.
Representative Bradstreet has a question for you, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Gribben, for being here. The 5%, that's per pay period, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Representative Gear.
And the question I would have, thank you, Mr. Chair, is, Mr. Gribben, is that I guess I'm just really confused that this isn't illegal to actually require an employee to pay you back when it is an error that the employer has made. Is there nothing elsewhere in statute that would just prevent this from happening?
Just to clarify, do you mean that would prevent an employer from recovering this from an employee?
Yes, it seems kind of crazy to me that if an employer makes a mistake, then the employee is responsible to pay that money back.
Yes, this is the only statute that I'm aware of that covers this type of situation. So employers are able to withhold 10% of an employee's pay right now, which, as you can imagine, has a pretty dramatic impact on employees, especially in situations, for example, where an employee may earn in error, let's say $5 per pay period over a 5-year period. That adds up to quite a bit. And then their pay can be withheld up to 10%, which is in most cases going to be more than $5. So they could earn it at a very slow rate, and the employer could withhold it at a very high rate, actually, which is what this reduction from 10% to 5% is meant to address.
Great, thank you.
Representative Bradstreet, you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the overpayment, is there ever a case where maybe sometimes the overpayment is made during a period where there's a disagreement over what the pay should be, and in the meantime, the employer pays a higher rate, later finds that he didn't have to, so therefore he can recover? I just wanted some clarification on that.
Yeah, I suppose that situation could come up. I have not encountered that situation in practice, but I can imagine that could be the case. I just have not encountered it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Rader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for being here. I just have one quick clarifying question. So we have the 3-year time limit on this for employers in this bill. Is there any stipulation for how quickly the employer must rectify this? And I ask this because of a specific example of my own, having been overpaid and then having to go through the process of getting a new check issued. It took months to get this rectified for me. So is there a stipulation in the bill that would prompt the rectification in an expedient manner?
I'm not aware of a stipulation that would require how quickly an employer fixes this. I believe that the 3-year period in there is about the look back period for how the total amount that an employer could recover, because right now there is no amount they could go back as far as the overpayment was happening.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Chairman Sylvester.
Thank you. And thank you for being here, Mr. Gribben. How, in the example that you gave, what is the normal process of someone being notified that they're about to receive a step increase or they're about to receive a merit increase? Because I remember there being notifications. So I wondered, how easy is this that somebody could just not notice that their pay went up or expect that it was something else?
Yeah, so I think it certainly depends on the situation. In most cases, at least as far as state employees go, an employee receives a step increase at their annual review date as part of their evaluation. Those can vary. Sometimes they're a little bit early, sometimes they're a little bit late. I think that the complicating factor in the case that I referenced was that there was a merit freeze at the time, and that complicated things because technically the person should have received a merit, but they were administratively frozen. So it gets a little bit more complicated, and it's not something that comes up very often. I think what is more often the case is where a merit increase occurs, let's say, but it's miscalculated. So they know that they're supposed to get an increase in pay, but it's miscalculated, and that increase ends up giving them an extra, let's say 50 cents, $1 per hour. And the employee may not immediately recognize that as being incorrect because they expected to get some sort of pay increase. It just may be a little bit more than what would be correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Mr. Gribbin, do you know if there are any statutory obligations for an employee to report to an employer that they've been overpaid?
So I believe I'd have to dig in a little bit more. I don't have the statute right in front of me, just the edits below me. I believe that if an employee is actually aware of an overpayment, the standard is slightly different. This really deals with situations where an employee is not actually aware of this happening.
Thank you. I was just curious. We can look into that
Sure.
for the work session, just because it's part of the purview of what we're doing here. Are there any other questions from the committee for Mr. Gribbin? Seeing none. Thank you for being here today. Ms. Thompson, if there's no one else, you're welcome. Signed up for LD 610. If you are an attendee and you'd like to testify on this bill, please indicate by raising your hand. Seeing no hands raised, I will close the public hearing on LD 610. I will now open the public hearing on LD 865, an act regarding the University of Maine system hiring practices sponsored by Representative Benjamin Collins of Portland. I see that he is here to present his bill. Thank you, sir.
Yes, good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester. I am having some technical Zoom issues, so I think I'll be able to remain on if I don't have the video on. Hopefully you can hear me clearly. So again, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, members of the Labor and Housing Committee. I'm Representative Benjamin Collins. I represent House District 42, which is part of the city of Portland. I'm presenting this bill with a concern for transparency, accountability, and making sure we have the best people to help lead and run our university system. The university is a large institution in Maine, as you know. It also is one of the largest employers in the state. And I believe that it should follow similar laws that we abide to, that state lawmakers subject others to go through in certain processes to be hired by the state of Maine as an employee or through a quasi-governmental entity that is funded by state tax dollars. And I don't really know the actual benefit to the state when we have people hired, which may be the case in the university, that doesn't go through a regular process where it's closed, where there isn't public input, where we don't know what's going on. And so that transparency, the lack of transparency concerns me. And I would like the committee to look into this and ask questions to why is this the case that this format wouldn't be followed like it's followed in other areas of the state? And is it the best interest for the state, for our students at universities, for the faculty that work there? Is there input? Are we getting the best people, or are we just getting political appointments and not really getting people that understand the university system, understand what it is to teach there, to work there, to be a student there. And that is basically the very simple motivation for me putting this bill in. And I just think there needs to be that transparency and accountability as there is anywhere else when we look at hiring people to lead some of the larger and most critical institutions in our state. So thank you very much for hearing this bill. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Collins. Representative Bradstreet has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative. Excuse me, what type of non-disclosure agreements are we talking about that's in the first part of your bill? A person involved in the hiring process, et cetera, may not be required to sign a non-disclosure agreement related to that hiring process. I understand non-disclosure in the private sector a lot of the time, but I guess I'd like a better understanding of this. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Representative Bradstreet. And I would hope that someone can answer this better than me after I speak. But I think that there really is no reason, there shouldn't be anything to hide, that they shouldn't be any non-disclosure agreement signed in this process. We should have open conversations about the hiring process. And I just don't see, I don't see any reason why, when we're going through this process, that we would not have an open discussion about it and we would hide information. That's why I put this bill in, is I'm hoping this can be answered and this could be addressed, because I honestly don't know why. I don't see a reason why we would have this at all in the process. I personally don't think there should be one. And that was kind of goes to my issue of being an open and fair hiring process. So people should be involved, and there shouldn't be anything that should be hidden in this. So
Are there any other questions from the committee for the bill sponsor? Seeing none, thank you, representatives. We will now take testimony from the public. I have two people signed up to testify on this bill. The first is Susan Feiner, followed by James, and I will not try to pronounce the last name in case I mess it up. So Ms. Thompson, if you could allow them into the room, and we will first hear from Susan Feiner.
Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester. My name is Susan Feiner. I am a recently retired professor, full professor from the University of Southern Maine, where I also served as the president of the local faculty union, AFM, Associated Faculties of the Universities of Maine. And one of our big roles as a union was, in fact, to make sure that hiring processes were going forward smoothly, that we didn't have inside hires for the faculty, for example, where a faculty member was able to bring in a co-author, for example, because that co-author's CV and application would go through the full vetting process that is required by HR. So you can imagine, and that goes for all the deans, for all the provosts, for all college presidents. So you can imagine how upset faculty across the University of Maine system were when, for the first time ever, the search for the chancellor, the most important senior person in the system, was a secret search. A secret search. We had no idea who the candidates were. We had no idea that there was any equal opportunity measures taken. We don't know if the pool included women. We don't know if the pool included scholars. We don't know what that pool is. And as faculty, we were very upset when the person who was hired, was another older white man. We have no shortage of them in Maine. But also that this person had absolutely no higher ed experience. The higher ed experience that he did have as the governor of Connecticut left the entire faculty of the University of Connecticut, plus the community colleges, furious, because he rode over the unions. He did everything and smushed the two systems together. They're now trying to fix it. It's a huge mess. And our Board of Trustees went out of their way to hire somebody who is universally despised on the campuses that he had anything to do with. If that was the only instance, it wouldn't be so bad. Currently, the senior academic vice president, the chancellor, is not someone who was hired through a search. Neither is the AVP for finance, for government relations, or for public relations. And I haven't gone digging deeper into that stack, but from my 23-year experience, I know for a fact that when political administrations end, the Baldacci administration did this, the LaPlague administration did it, they take people out of their staff who need jobs, I'll finish right now, and stick them in the university where they have no experience, and they make a mess. They make a mess where we need hardworking, clear-headed people. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Feiner, for your testimony. Representative Bradstreet has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. A couple of questions, if I may. One is regarding the question I asked Representative Collins, and that, what are we talking about by non-disclosure agreements? And the second one is, what type of authority is there now overseeing the hiring practice? Is that not the Board of Trustees of the University of Maine system?
Let me answer the first question because it's easier, and maybe my mind will come up with an answer to your second. I'm having a hard time looking at you and seeing myself. I was not working during the pandemic, and Zoom is confusing to me. I apologize. There is no role for non-disclosure agreements in the hiring process in institutions of public higher education. That might not be the case for private schools, but we are not here talking about private schools. We're talking about the University of Maine system, the 6th largest employer in the state, and they use non-disclosure agreements and they waive searches in order to put their friends in high earning positions. And that's why they exist. There's a literature on that. Your second question, who is the final decider in hiring at the University of Maine system? Yes, it is the Board of Trustees. At the time of the current search, Sam Collins was the chair of the Board of Trustees, and he led that search, I believe. No, Mr. Irwin led the search. Anyway, they were insistent that there could be no faculty on that search committee unless they signed non-disclosure agreements. We actually didn't even know who was on the committee because the committee composition was secret. So you can imagine how upsetting it is. I mean, we're not even allowed to do consulting work as faculty without signing a million pieces of paper saying what we're doing, how much money we're getting, is it taking away from our school time? We're so supervised. The clerical staff and the professional staff are even more scrutinized and monitored minute by minute. And yet the Board of Trustees goes out and acts in secret. It makes no sense. It's a clear double standard. I hope that's answered your question.
Representative Bradstreet, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do have a follow-up. So I'm still trying to understand all of this. So if a candidate for a certain position wishes to remain anonymous, would this bill prevent that from happening?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Rader.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Feiner. I have a quick question and a slight follow-up. It's a very short two-parter. So we've recently, there's been a bill, LD 1253, an act to add a faculty member and non-faculty staff member to the Board of Trustees of the University of Maine system. Do you think that would partially or maybe even completely address this issue?
I think that's a good beginning. There's also another bill that calls for 6 faculty to be on the Board of Trustees, because the Board of Trustees, as you know, is 12 people and 1 faculty person and 1 staff person. There's no way they can stand up to a phalanx of some of the highest paid, most successful business persons in the state of Maine. And that's what you have there now. with a couple of small exceptions that the Governor Mills was able to achieve in her last round of appointments. But I have dealt with that Board of Trustees many times under many different boards, and they are a very, very lockstep group, and there's not much discussion. They allow the points of view all the way between A and B.
All right, Mr. Chair, may I have a quick follow-up?
You may proceed.
Could you remind me really quickly of your union again?
AFM, Associated Faculties of the Universities of Maine.
Fantastic. Has AFM checked in with the Part-Time Faculty Association regarding this particular bill? I'm an adjunct, so I have to ask.
I do not know that answer to that question.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Gear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question has to do with any existing policy within the University of Maine system that governs executive searches specifically. Is there any, to your knowledge, Professor Feiner, an existing written policy that would govern that process?
Yeah, there is. And I know that there's some language that when senior, I'm not going to get this right, but it's close to something like, and Mr. Thalen is there, he knows the rules a lot better than I do at this point. But there is some discretion on the part of the chancellor and other senior administrators to bring in persons without a search. The point of this, or part of the point of this legislation, is to make sure that is used minimally. Because right now, frankly, it's been abused by the board and senior administrators. I know that I had a conversation maybe a year ago with someone in the university system specifically about this process. And they insisted to me that they were following all the rules about when searches could be waived and this, that, and the other thing. So yes, there is some language that allows those waivers. I don't think they're being used judiciously. I think the vast majority of the faculty would agree with me on that. And we have to ask, why would searches be waived if there are people out there in the world who could do that job better than people who are being moved from one branch of government over to the University of Maine system when they have almost no higher ed experience?
Thank you.
Chairman.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you for being here, Professor Feiner. I'm a list maker. I've been trying to put in order sort of what, as I listening to your and the sponsors' testimony, sort of what the priorities are here. And here's the way I'm hearing them, and tell me if I'm wrong. That we know who the candidates are, as number one. That we know who the search committee is, number two. And then that there be access, that faculty are part of that committee, and then non-disclosure agreements. Am I, I mean, I think that the first two parts sort of take off the fourth part. That's why I pushed that further down the list.
Mm-hmm.
Am I close on that?
I think you're very close. If you were to talk to the HR persons on the campuses and get a feel for the extensive nature of the searching and the vetting that we do to hire faculty, you would be very confused why the same standards are not being used for the highest, most important decision-making systems in the system. Why would you hire somebody to administer something in the university system when their full extent of knowledge of higher education is that they went to college?
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
That doesn't qualify you.
Yep, thank you so much for your answer. Thanks.
Representative Gear, did you have a follow-up?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. One more question, Professor Feiner. I'm curious, as to your knowledge, has the University of Maine system done any review of hiring policies and practices with an eye towards diversity, equity, and inclusion at this point, and including at the senior executive level?
Yeah, they have, and then they quickly get filed in the circular filing cabinet. As the director of the Women and Gender Studies program at USM, which is the largest women and gender studies program north of Boston, and the oldest one in Northern New England, we were tasked with looking at the EEO and the diversity procedures across the system, because until very recently, the system funded a Women and Gender Studies consortium, which they decided to defund in one of these political moves. Of course, half the women in Maine aren't women. So anyway, yes, we looked into that. We found massive problems, massive across the campuses. For example, I did a salary review one time, and all the men who had these units were getting paid close to $100,000. And then the women who were immediately under them were earning like 40, 45,000. And that was uniform, campus after campus after campus. There are almost no African-American administrators. People who are of color who come to the university to work in the administration, if they last 2 years, it's a lot. I've been called a dirty Jew by a member of the current sitting board of trustees.
Are there any other questions for the professor? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony today. Representative Warren, would you care to introduce yourself?
Good morning. Hello, everyone. My name is Sophie Warren, and I'm very grateful and proud to represent Scarborough Coastal District 29, and I apologize for my lateness this morning.
Not a problem. Next to testify on LD 865, we have Mr. James Phelan, and I apologize if I didn't say that correctly. Welcome.
Thank you, Senator Hickman. No, you absolutely got it correct. I applaud you for that. And I'm happy to follow Professor Feiner. We interacted on occasion, and I always admired her passion, which was so evident in her own testimony here ahead of me. I would like to offer, in the spirit of what we're doing here, some friendly amendments to some of the statements that she offered to the committee. I do want to be clear, by the way, I've submitted written testimony in opposition to LD 865. As I don't believe it's necessary, but I'd like to address some of the points that Professor Feiner offered. And I appreciate as well, Representative Sylvester, your identifying the key issues as you were keeping track of them, knowing who the candidates are in key searches, knowing who the search committee members are, that faculty and staff and students are represented. And then a second issue that was not yours, Representative Sylvester, but another member of the committee, how DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts play into our work. So let me address some of these issues.
Mr. Phelan, please defer. Before you continue, can you just let other people who may not know you know who you are in case they're listening in and have never heard your voice before?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for that reminder, Senator Hickman. My name is James Phelan. I am the Vice Chancellor for Strategic Initiatives and Chief Legal Officer for the University of Maine System. And in that role, Human Resources reports to my office. And I am very familiar with the search processes that we use at all levels of our institution, whether it's faculty searches, which are carefully governed by collective bargaining agreements with the associated faculties of the University of Maine, of which Professor Feiner was such a key participant, as well as president and chancellor searches as well.
Thank you for that. Please continue.
Sure. And again, thank you for the reminder. My apologies. The process that the University of Maine System Board uses in hiring presidents and the chancellor is carefully spelled out in written policy that is not deviated from. That policy carefully dictates which representatives of faculty, students, administrators across the system participate as a search committee. That search committee meets publicly and reports publicly to the Board of Trustees on its work. It does take advantage at times of executive session requirements to discuss candidates and qualifications of individual applicants, as is provided by Maine's Freedom of Access Act which allows executive session discussion of those items. So that does at times take place in a closed executive session. I want to move at this point to what appears to be one of the keys or purposes of the proposed legislation, and that is on non-disclosure agreements. As I read the text of the proposal, it would apply to prevent a non-disclosure agreement from any participant in the hiring process. I can tell you that the purpose of those non-disclosure agreements, which are not always used, not every search has any component that's closed. But what we've found more recently in recent years working with national search recruiting firms is that there are highly qualified candidates in other presidencies, in other provost positions, political positions, as Professor Feiner pointed out, who are unwilling to apply if they understand that their names will become public before they're offered a job. That severely compromises the ability of the University of Maine system to attract highly qualified, experienced higher education leaders from other states in other positions where they may be risking their jobs if their name is public before a job offer is secured from the University of Maine system. So they do serve a vital purpose, and it is important, I believe, that the University of Maine System Board have the discretion to use those in order to guarantee that we can attract a qualified pool of executive candidates for these important positions. I want to reiterate what I said a minute ago, that faculty and students absolutely participate in the process. That again is written into board policy, is followed in every search. The key though is that we want to have the discretion to determine whether we will not be able to draw an experienced candidate pool if the applicants believe that their identities could become public before the end of the search. I want to finally address the question from another member of the committee.
Mr. Thalen, unfortunately, that's your time. So if you could wrap up your thoughts, please.
I'll stop there and just be happy to answer questions. And again, I have submitted written testimony as well.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Sylvester has a question.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Mr. Thalen. My question is I guess I'm just going to be upfront that I have a follow-up. My first question is that why does there seem to be this impression, if the way that you've described this process, that in the searches that were named by the good professor, that nobody knew who was on the final list and nobody knew who was on the committee?
I can't speak to what Professor Feiner knew and when, but I know I can point to public minutes of our Board of Trustees meetings where we gave public reports. We publicly charge and identify the identities of the search committee, who the faculty representative is, who the student representative is, who the administrators and other makeup of the committee. It is all a matter of public record. It is not hidden in any way. I can assure you of that. The only part of the process, and we're only talking about the chancellor here, our most recent presidential searches, the board determined that they wanted to have a completely public process where the final candidates were publicly identified, were brought to campus for public interviews, and it was very public. But we, in carefully exercising that discretion, we make a judgment search by search with input from our search consultants as to whether we will be able to draw a qualified pool if we are fully public, if we have a partially public, partially closed process. And if I might, I'll just very briefly mention that the search for the current chancellor was what would be considered a hybrid process. The identities of the search committee was very public. We publicly reported to the board meetings as the search was progressing. But the final candidate interviews, there were 4 finalists who were brought, and they met privately in hotel conference rooms with a group of 40 individuals that represented faculty, students, administrators, presidents of our universities, board of visitors members, who did sign non-disclosure agreements that only indicated that they would promise not to reveal the identities of the finalists because, again, to the point earlier, those candidates had indicated that they would be likely to not apply if their identities would be public before a job offer was made. So how the search was conducted was in no way confidential or secret. We were very public about that process. The NDAs, the non-disclosure agreements, related only to the identities of the final 4 candidates that were brought in to meet with these representative groups. And I believe about 40 people made up that final interview process, including our Director of Government Relations, Sam Warren, who's with us here today. And she, by the way, was hired as a result of a public search as well.
May I have my foreshadowed follow-up, Mr. Chair? My follow-up is this: do you feel that the university is not only a closed system, it's part of the community, it's part of the state as a whole, it's obviously part of this legislature, and I guess my question is, do you feel there's a difference between sort of casting the wider net of 40 candidates who might be interested and those final 4 and being able to have a very public vetting of that? Because I think that if we did our business like that, where we just passed bills without letting anybody know that we were doing so until we were ready to announce, I bet we could get a lot of things done, but it wouldn't be a very fair process for the community at large. So your thoughts on wider net versus being able to make it public at the end, and someone being willing to do that in order to have their best shot to get to be in this very important position.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Representative Sylvester. And I would note, just for context, I came here from Michigan and I had worked in higher ed in Michigan, and there was a lot of debate there. I'm well aware this is a highly debated question. I do want to add one clarification, though, given your question. My reference earlier to 40 people is 40 people were the number of people who participated in the interviews from the University of Maine system side. So that was faculty representatives, student representatives, presidents of our universities, system administrators, university administrators, alumni, Board of Visitors members. So that constituted the group that interviewed the final 4 candidates. It was those 40 people who signed NDAs to promise not to disclose the identities of those candidates. They all met. They provided feedback to the search committee on what the strengths and weaknesses of the 4 candidates were, and then made recommendations to the search committee based on that. So that's how the process worked for us. It's what the search consultant would call a hybrid search, where there's a partially open process, but a partially closed process. And again, the determination is made by the board in its discretion as to whether or not, and frankly, that decision doesn't have to be made immediately, but as the search consultant is building the pool, if what they are hearing as they look around to highly qualified people around the country based on the candidate profile, the board's judgment of the needs of the system in its executive leaders, if they are finding that potential applicant after potential applicant is not willing to apply because of the final public nature of those final interviews, then there's a discussion at the board level of whether a hybrid process like I'm discussing better serves the interests and guarantees a more highly qualified final pool. I do want to acknowledge it is a debate around the country in higher education, whether it should be fully open, whether there could be a fully closed process or something in the middle. And we've most recently with the chancellor search used what I would call something in the middle. And by and large, there was satisfaction with the process, notwithstanding Professor Finer's passionate statements here.
Thank you, Mr. Thiel.
I think you're muted. I don't know.
You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
Still muted. I have a quick question, if it's okay.
I'm the one.
Go ahead, oh, there he goes.
Go ahead, Mr. Representative Bradstreet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here, sir. I appreciate it. You're written, just a quick question. Your written hiring policy, is that part of your written testimony? If not, could it be provided to us?
We certainly can provide it. I would defer to Sam Warren if we've already provided or if we can do so.
Okay, that'd be fine for the work session. Thank you.
Sure.
Representative Gear.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks for being here, Mr. Thalen. I'm going to follow our esteemed co-chair, Representative Sylvester, in the foreshadowing a follow-up if I could. But the first question I have is the process around identifying candidates for senior positions. I'm curious as to any work that the university system has done in looking at the formation of the pipeline for senior executive candidates and how you are looking to address any discrepancies or any historical biases in that pipeline as you're looking for candidates. And then the piece of the process that has to do with weighting, the weighting of all the different factors. Clearly, one of the things we're discussing today is the weighting of leadership in the education sector and higher ed sector versus potentially leadership from other sectors. And I'm curious as to whether the system has done work in thinking about how it's weighting those different types of expertise and experience.
Sure. Thanks, Representative Gear. I'll address the second question first. No, let me start with the first. I would say that I don't know off the top of my head the percentage or number of searches where we will work with a search consultant, often with national reach. But it is very typical for certainly all presidential searches, the chancellor search, typically the next level down, whether it's vice chancellor or vice presidential level, provost level, chief business officer level at our universities. Almost always we will rely on a partnership with a national search consultant who has deep experience, deep applicant pools, a long reach and ability to recruit not only experienced candidates, but diverse candidates, and diverse not just in our traditional notions of diversity, but also diverse in an experience background. As I acknowledged to Representative Sylvester, I'll say here too, there is certainly debate. I fully acknowledge the debate about whether an executive leader of a university or a university system should come only from higher education, or whether other experience qualifies and enables them to be an effective executive of our higher education institution. We're seeing that test right now with the former governor of Connecticut as our current chancellor. And he's been here long enough that I'm sure there will be some who would say, no, we don't want that type of experience. But I can tell there are others who are also very happy with the progress and the momentum that he has generated from the executive experience he brought from the governmental realm in Connecticut. So there is a strong debate. We have a search underway right now, again, using a national search consultant for a chief human resources officer for our system. We've had the same debate there. Do we have to have human resource experience only in higher education? Or is experience, for example, in healthcare institutions relevant? Is experience in the military relevant? And those are all questions that are debated within the discretion of the board and the university system in making the best decision we can about the appropriate executive for the needs we have at the time. And then the final point I'll make, I had started to make when I ran out on my 3 minutes on my original testimony on the diversity, equity, and inclusion effort. Every search we conduct starts out with charging the search committee and ensuring that they are trained in and have a session with our diversity, equity, and inclusion and equal employment office to make sure that from a process standpoint, we're following not only the law, but also best practices and ensuring that we don't have any implicit bias or other barriers that would block out diverse candidates from finding our advertisements and participating in our process and having equal access and opportunity to the entire hiring process at the university system. I believe I addressed both of your points, but if I neglected anything, please let me know.
That was very helpful. And if I could have a follow on, Mr. Chair.
You may proceed.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the segue into the implicit bias discussion there, Mr. Thalen. That was something that I did want to touch on because there is, an increasingly large body of research that shows how implicit bias plays into these kinds of decisions. And so I would just, following on from the statement that you just made, I wonder if there is a process during the interview and assessment process for these positions that helps to help the interviewers and the evaluators understand if and interrupt implicit bias if it is coming into the process at that point.
So the simple answer I would say is yes. Our EO office and HR offices work independent of our search committees to make sure that all search committee members have this training, have a specific presentation targeted at the position for which we are hiring and searching, or searching and hiring in that order. So certainly that effort is made. And then I will tell you too, as the process goes on, as a search goes on, whether, and again, it's the run of things that most searches have a public phase at the end. The chancellor search was the exception, as I described earlier. But there is an assessment made again before finalists are declared, before final interviews are scheduled, of whether the EO office is satisfied that we have done everything that we can to avoid implicit bias, both in how our questions are formed for the interviews, in what the resulting candidate pool looks like as we make decisions, winnowing down the candidate pool toward a final group. I can tell you every effort is taken intentionally to address those concerns. Can we say we're perfect? I'm sure we're not, but we make every effort to make sure that we have addressed those concerns as we go through our process.
Thank you.
Representative Drinkwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I only live minutes from the University of Maine. Have a lot of University of Maine friends that work there. I can tell you that the rumor mill is prevalent. How long has these non-disclosure agreements been in the system? And also, I would assume that these NDAs would affect the hiring of a new hockey coach, seeing as how we're going to be going through that process.
So a couple of parts to your question. I'll address the final point first. We've not made a decision about using what process or how we'll form the search for a hockey coach. Obviously, the shocking news of Coach Jenneran's death took us all by surprise. We have an interim coach, and that's as far as we've gotten at this point. I will tell you again, it is rare that we use NDAs in the hiring process. The way the bill is written, it seems to be targeted at NDAs used only in a hiring process. But I would note just contextually that we use NDAs in hiring, for example, at the Advanced Structures and Composites Center at the University of Maine, because of the classified nature of some of the research, the Department of Defense nature of the research, export control requirements for federal national security. All of those things require NDAs, but they don't appear to be the type of NDAs targeted by this bill. So I'll just note that point contextually. And I think that addresses your questions, Representative, but I'm happy to follow up if I missed anything.
Yeah, the other question was, how long have we used these in the system, these NDAs?
I don't have specifics on how far back they've been used in this way. Certainly we can follow up though for the work session.
All right, thank you very much.
Representative Rader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up on something that Representative Geer was talking about in her question regarding hiring practices. And I wanted to ask if the university is planning for a more extensive effort of reaching out to communities of color and other diverse communities, because what we're seeing in today's society is the fact that just putting out an advertisement that anyone can see is not enough in order to ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion in the hiring practice. So if you could speak a little bit to the university's effort to make outreach efforts in their hiring practices, I'd love to hear about that. Thank you.
Sure. And if I might take just a couple of seconds to put this in context. Chancellor Malloy issued a call to action, if you will, just under a year ago when George Floyd died in Minneapolis, and asked our academic affairs offices, our human resource offices, and our student services offices to essentially look at what you're doing, root out, identify any form of implicit bias that we can look at. Maine is not a richly diverse state, depending on what measure you use, but that's never an excuse for not making every effort we can to make sure that we don't have bias in any of those areas in our university system. You asked specifically about hiring. So we are ensuring that when we do advertise, we're not limiting it ourselves to just, we're advertising here because that's where we've always advertised. We're challenging ourselves to look at what the results of those efforts in the past have been, and have they resulted in diverse pools of candidates, qualified candidates. And if not, we challenge ourselves to reach more broadly, different venues, making sure that we have critical input to test our assumptions in those areas. So I can tell you that work is clearly underway. I would note too, in fact, a month ago at the University of Maine System Board's March 22nd meeting, the board charged the chancellor to institute a diversity, equity, and inclusion steering committee that had been at the system level, that had been proposed back in the late 90s, but never acted on for lack of funding, administrator turnover, executive turnover, president and chancellor turnover. It never went anywhere, and it quite frankly got forgotten. But I can tell you the people that the chancellor has initially charged to do this work are excited because of his commitment to make sure it happens. And if you would like more information on specific HR actions that we're taking that I don't have at my fingertips today, I will be happy to follow up.
Thank you so much. One quick follow-up, Mr. Chair.
Okay, proceed.
Thank you. So for the beginning of your response, you spoke of advertising. Is that currently the level that the university is at in terms of expanding the diverse hiring practices, that it's limited to advertising without an outreach component as of yet?
We're getting into a little more detail than I am comfortable speaking with certainty. But I can say at a general level, yes, we're going beyond advertising because it obviously includes training. It includes outreach. It includes educational opportunities for our administrators, for our faculty, for university and system leaders. And that all plays into how we approach a search when the opportunity for a search does come up. So I feel badly that I'm speaking in generalities. We can certainly identify specific data points, practices for the work session if that would help, Representative Rader.
I would appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions from the committee for Mr. Thalen? I think the one I have is I may have interrupted you when you were speaking in order to make sure that we knew who was talking, but you said you had some friendly amendments that you might want to offer, and I would like to hear what those are.
They perhaps were a little bit tongue-in-cheek, not relative to the legislation and the wording of it itself. It was more to correct some statements that Professor Feiner had offered about the secrecy of our process, which did not bear out in fact.
Thank you for the clarification. If there are no other questions, we will see you at the work session. And does the committee, is it clear what we want from Mr. Thalen for the work session? Excellent. And with that, unless there are any other attendees who would like to testify on LD 865, raise your hand if you have not signed up and wish to do so. Seeing no hands raised, I will close the public hearing on LD 865. And with that, seeing that the bill sponsor is yes with us, I will open the public hearing on LD 938, an act to ensure Maine workers' rights to request a schedule change at their places of employment presented by Representative Barbara Wood of Portland. Welcome, Representative. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and esteemed members of the Labor and Housing Committee. I'm Barb Wood, and I represent House District 38, which is the western end of the peninsula in Portland. I'm here today to present LD 938, an act to ensure Maine workers' right to request a schedule change at their place of employment. This bill creates, as the title says, the right for an employee to request a change of schedule. You may ask, why is this needed? I asked myself that same question when I first spoke with the organization that wanted me to sponsor this bill. I myself worked at one of the largest employers in the state of Maine, and employees requesting schedule changes was an everyday part of our business. Sometimes the request was granted, sometimes it wasn't. Where I worked, there were absolutely no repercussions for an employee to make this request. I feel quite fortunate that I worked at one of the best employers in the state of Maine. Many employers are quite good, like the experience I had. Unfortunately, and that's why I'm here today, some employers are not. This legislation would protect employees from retaliation for making these kind of scheduling requests. This would support families and help to provide stability for workers. Vermont has realized this need and passed legislation. More recently, New Hampshire has also come on board. If passed, how would this work? Simply put, an employee must make their request in writing and include the reason for their requested schedule change. It would not force an employer to grant the request. If the request is denied, the employer must respond in writing stating the reason for the denial and offering an alternative if an alternative is available. Two other points that I would like to make you aware of. First, as drafted, this would not apply to employers with 10 or fewer employees. I've been asked how I came about with that number. Truthfully, I talked with some small businesses in my neighborhood. Various other numbers have been talked about. 10 is used in the act authorizing earned employee leave that was passed in the last session. And I think you will also have a request from another speaker today to not put any limit on the number of employees. So I leave that number to this committee's discretion. Secondly, the amount of the fine, $5,000 as listed in the bill, is something that I would also leave to discretion. The earned employee leave has a $1,000 fine in it. A non-compete bill from a couple of years ago had a $5,000 fine. So there's other bills that have other amounts. At that, I thank you for your time and consideration. I'll answer any questions that I can. There are also folks testifying after me who are better qualified to speak to the merits of this bill.
Thank you, Representative Wood, for bringing this forward. Are there any questions for the sponsor? Seeing none. We have a few people signed up to testify on this bill. First, in favor of the bill, it's Mr. James Mile. And then we will turn to testimony in opposition to the bill. And we have signed up Christine Cummings, Dana Duran, Deborah Hart, Greg Dougal, Jessica LaLiberty, Josh Tardy, and Steve DeMillo. So, Mr. Mile, welcome.
Hi everyone, welcome. Sorry, I was promoted just as you were saying my name, so I didn't catch it originally. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, members of the committee. As you know, my name is James Mile. I'm here to testify on behalf of the Maine Center for Economic Policy in support of LD 938. We support this bill because Mainers deserve to be able to ask their employer for reasonable accommodations to balance their work, family, and personal lives. LD 938 would not completely solve all the problems mainers face with unpredictable and irregular work schedules, but it does represent a good first step in addressing the issue. This bill would enshrine the ability to request a schedule change as a right in Maine statute, and importantly, require employers to provide a written response to this requested schedule change. For example, this would allow a new parent to ask to change their regular hours of work to reflect their new home and family life, or it would allow a Mainer with a sick relative to ask for a temporary schedule change that would allow them to help care for that relative. The wider problem of unpredictable and irregular work schedules is well documented. According to a 2019 survey of Maine's private sector workers conducted by MECEP, almost 1 in 3 Maine workers has a schedule that varies at least partially at the behest of their employer with or without their input. Research shows that the workers suffer when they can't have at least some level of control over their schedule. Nationally, 1/3 of workers with a variable schedule set by their employer say they find it difficult to get by, or that they're just only able to get by financially, compared to 1/5 of workers with set schedules. One research group at the University of California in Berkeley has documented a series of harms associated with varying and unpredictable schedules, including psychological distress, lack of sleep, in addition to varying incomes. The legislation before you represents a modest advancement towards work-life balance for Maine workers. As you have heard, it doesn't require that the employer has to grant the schedule change. It just requires employers to consider a request, and if they deny it, to explain why. It doesn't create a mandate, it simply opens a dialogue between worker and employer. While many employers may already engage in this kind of dialogue with their workers, LD 938 would ensure that all Mainers have the right to request these scheduling accommodations when needed. With the modest nature of the bill in mind, MECEP would suggest the committee revise the size of employer covered by the law. In general, I would say that the current threshold of 10 or fewer employees would exclude about 1 in 7 workers from this law's protection. And in general, we believe that Mainers who work at small businesses deserve the same basic rights as workers at larger firms. We would also suggest that you may want to consider adding language to explicitly bar employers from retaliation against employees who request scheduling changes. I know you're going to hear a bill on Friday, LD 1338, which would apply this kind of anti-retaliation provision more broadly in Maine's law. But in the meantime, it would probably be a good idea to add it to this piece of legislation. We know too many Maine workers don't exercise rights like this because they fear that they'll be punished or treated badly at work for doing so. With those amendments in mind, I would suggest you support LD 938 and vote ought to pass on the bill. As always, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mile. Are there any questions from the committee? Representative Bradstreet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mile, for being here. Do you have any numbers or anything of people who have complained that their employers have not reasonably considered scheduling changes? Are there any numbers anywhere?
I have the numbers in my testimony that talk about the number of folks who have, irregular schedules, but I don't know that I have specific numbers about complaints about employers not granting requests. I'll see if I can find something for you for the work session.
That would be fine. Thank you.
Any other questions? To follow on to that, do you have any examples, anecdotally, but of course we do like data, but just anecdotally, what ways do employers retaliate against those who would just request a schedule change?
So I don't work directly with workers in the way that some groups do, and some other groups maybe have to inform more of this, but some of the things I've heard is that, for example, an employer may decide to, give you unfavorable hours the next week, or move you to sort of the shifts that people don't want to work, like the closing and opening shifts. There are also some places of work where there are, you may get passed over for a promotion, that sort of thing. So sometimes it can be kind of, not necessarily, sometimes it can be sort of in small ways that add up, or building a hostile work environment as well. I think it's worth noting that, you may hear, I think, from some of the business groups that they don't want to be caught in a situation where anything could be construed as sort of retaliation for this kind of thing. I think it's probably worth bearing in mind that, there's usually a pretty high bar for kind of retaliation provisions in general, that the employee has to be able to prove that it is explicitly retaliation, not, just a coincidence.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, we will now move to testimony in opposition to the bill. And Ms. Thompson, if you could let people in twos, that would be great. With smooth sailing, Christine Cummings, Dana Duran, followed by Deborah Hart and Greg Dougal. Welcome, Ms. Cummings. You are first up. Good
Good
morning.
morning. Hello. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and members of the Labor and Housing Committee. My name is Christine Cummings. I'm the Executive Director of the Maine Grocers and Food Producers Association. Originally from Augusta, I now live in Sydney, and I grew up working at my father's convenience store and coincidentally now advocate on many of the issues we discussed growing up that affect his business and the members of ours alike. LD 938, as noted, would require an employer of 10 or more to respond in writing to a requested change in an employee's schedule within 7 days. And if they cannot accommodate their request, they must include a reason and an alternative option if available. In today's work environment, those who are not accommodating and meeting their employees' needs are the businesses having the most difficulty retaining their staff. There is a mutual understanding between the employer and the employee in the workplace, and an existing understanding to accommodate employees with reasonable and manageable schedules. We question the true need for this to be in Maine's labor laws and/or whether or not this is simply a solution looking for a problem. A business with 10 or more employees does not necessarily have a designated human resource staffer within their business. Many times they've contracted with a consultant, or in some instances, the owners and managers take on the HR-related tasks themselves. These small business owners and managers take on many roles, whether it be scheduling, product inventory management, receiving goods, financials, and payroll. Our small businesses are tightly managed ships, and they do not have the manpower to take on additional mandated laborious schedule management tasks that are best left managed and in a preferred communication method between the employer and the employee. We question, what are the specifics of the written request format? What are the specifics of the written required reply? Would all change requests by every employee then need to be in writing and then also documented for record keeping? While the employee may have the request for the scheduled changes, there are no guarantees that the accommodation must be granted, and we then question what determines and defines an acceptable alternative. How many requests may an employee make, and on what ground are their requests considered reasonable? And contrastingly, how is the employee held accountable when they do not abide by the schedule? Unfortunately, many of our employers have an abundance of employees that do not show up for their shifts. In addition to the unknowns and the complexities, the fine is unreasonably high. There are so many factors that come into play when crafting a schedule, including promotions, sales, holiday and seasonality influences, product shipment and deliveries, payroll cycles, community and in-store events, and unforeseen factors such as weather and distribution disruptions, as we all have seen most readily. Schedules are typically done within a reasonable 1 to 2 week of posted notice advance, and other changes are already coming into play, which include employees' requested modifications. Scheduling is an amicable relationship between an employer and an employee, and the realities of everyday life and the ability to make changes and have flexibility is an important component best left between the business and the employee to manage the balance. We ask the committee vote ought not to pass on LD 938, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Ms. Cummings. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Duran, you are next.
Terrific. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Dana Duran, and I'm the Executive Director of the Professional Logging Contractors of Maine, trade association in Augusta that represents logging and trucking contractors throughout the state. Logging and trucking are a $620 million component of an $8.5 billion forest products industry, and logging directly employs 3,900 people and is responsible for the addition of 5,400 indirect jobs. I'm here today to testify in opposition to LD 938. You should have a copy of my written remarks as well. I will summarize those. I think many of the comments that Ms. Cummings made are attributable or applicable to what I'm going to point out. But our sense is this is a mandate that Maine's small business community hasn't asked for, and nor can they afford. And it's really, to us, kind of yet another example this legislative session that employees can't work together, and that employers can't be trusted, and therefore the government needs to intervene on their behalf. As Ms. Cummings mentioned, we also feel it's a solution in search of a problem. It sounds like, from what the sponsor mentioned, it's almost an extension of the leave bill from last session. If it's related to that bill, or if it's related to the ability for employees to take leave, I don't necessarily think that the solution that's been put on paper is going to solve that. I'll also say that all of our employers live in rural Maine communities, and they do not rule with an iron fist. They are very flexible with their employees. They expect the same flexibility of their employees to their work environment. Logging and trucking is directly attributable to weather conditions, which change every day, and work schedules can change every single day because of the weather. Having something like this would certainly put a unfunded mandate upon contractors and effectively put them out of business. And lastly, I'll say if this were to go into effect, especially with a cap of 10 employees or larger, I can tell you that about 75% of our members have more than 10 employees, and most all of them would look to cut their workforce just to be under that level of 10. So with that, I'm not going to continue on reading my testimony, but I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I urge the committee to vote ought not to pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duran. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Thank you.
It's Deborah Hart, followed by Gregory Dougal, Jessica La Liberty, Josh Tardy, and Steve DeMello.
Senator Hickman, good morning. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and members of the Labor Committee. I'm sorry, the Labor and Housing Committee. My name is Deborah Hart. I'm a resident of Manchester, Maine, and I'm speaking to you today on behalf of my client, the Retail Association of Maine. The position of the Retail Association of Maine, first of all, they have 350 members statewide. They represent retailers of all sizes, and they employ more than 85,000 Mainers. The position of the Retail Association of Maine is that there are many workplaces, not just retail, where schedules are flexible and not set. This bill presumes all workers at employers with 10 or more employees have set work schedules, which, as Mr. Duran just told you, is not true. Under this proposal, an employee can request a schedule change and the employer can deny it, but must provide the denial in writing within 7 days. If an alternative is available, that must be included in the written response. Failure to adhere to this would trigger a fine of at least $5,000. This bill presumes, as you've heard, that employee-employee relationships is contentious. Employers accommodate schedules changes all the time, and we do not see the need for this bill. We urge you to vote ought not to pass on this LD.
Thank you, Ms. Hart, for your testimony. Representative Bradstreet has a question for you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Hart, for being here. A couple of you have talked about reasonable accommodations or something, an alternative scheduling. In some cases, if that were to be granted, would that then not maybe affect other employees who would then have their schedules changed?
We think that that's the case.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that question.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here today. Next up is Mr. Dougal.
Thank you, sir. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and distinguished members of the Joint Committee of Labor and Housing. My name is Greg Newell, and I'm here representing Hospitality Maine today in opposition to LD 938, an act to ensure Maine workers' right to request a schedule change at their places of employment. We have a couple of questions about this proposed legislation, and number one, under the proposed 600, the new 600A, would this only apply to an individual that has a previously agreed upon work schedule? In our business, schedules are generally made weekly or bi-weekly on a flexible schedule and based on business levels. 1 week that could be a busy Monday holiday like Patriots Day just the other day, and 1 week a Thursday because of a playoff game on the big screen. In most cases, there is no agreement made at the point of hiring that is any different than that. I know there are some employees, specifically salaried ones, that may have a set schedule, but the vast majority of exempt and non-exempt employees do not start employment with a set schedule. And number two on there, there's no set schedule agreed to at the time of hire, then we would assume that there would be no requirements here for an employer with no such agreement, correct? We have members and your constituents testifying today and others that have already submitted written testimony. Please take into consideration what they are saying and what they have been through the last year or more with their pandemic losses. It also does seem to Hospitality Maine that for whomever this proposed statute would apply to, that a $5,000 fine for the first infraction is a little on the exorbitant side and very business unfriendly. And I think that the sponsor agreed to that. We would respectfully suggest to the committee that LD 938 be voted out, ought not to pass, and we thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Dougal. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Thank you, sir. Have
You're
a good
welcome.
day.
You too. Next up, Jessica LaLiberty. Welcome.
Welcome. Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor and Housing. My name is Jessica LaLiberty. I am the Policy Relations Manager for the Manufacturers Association of Maine, a nonpartisan pro-growth, pro-manufacturing industry organization representing 400 Maine manufacturing businesses in our great state and the 29,000 workers they employ. It should be noted that many of our members are employee-owned or ESOP companies. I'm here today to speak in opposition of LD 938, an act to ensure Maine workers' right to request a schedule change at their places of employment. This bill is yet another this session seeking to place further regulation on businesses in the state. LD 938 would require an employer respond in writing to an employee's request to change his or her schedule. As proposed, an employee has the right to request a temporary change to last up to 1 year to a previously agreed upon work schedule. The request must be made in writing and must describe the reason for the request. Failure to respond in writing by the employer will result in a fine of no less than $5,000 for the business. What if an employee makes the request via text message? Is a response text back deemed a written response? Further, there is no limitation on the number of requests that can be made in a year. Many of Maine's manufacturers operate multiple shifts a day, some of which are less desirable than others. Each shift or week, an employee could request a change in their shift for any number of reasons: childcare concerns, leisure activities, and manufacturers would be tasked with responding to each of these requests despite an employee being hired to work a specific set shift. Proposals like this are another overreach of government into private business. They add more regulation and thus the administrative burden to operations and further weaken Maine's business friendliness ranking. Yet again, we ask, how does this bill align with the economic strategy of the state to attract new businesses and grow the workforce? I think an important point here is workforce. We are challenged to fill openings we have. We need more employees before we can have flexibility in scheduling. The Manufacturers Association of Maine opposes this bill and urges an ought not to pass vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Liberty. Representative Bradstreet has a question for you.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Liberty, for being here. Actually, you answered one of the questions I was going to ask about there's no limit to the number of requests that can be made. Is there any limit in the bill, from your reading it, as the number of people at any one time who can make a scheduling change request?
Not as I read it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Mr. Josh Tardy.
Good morning, Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester. I'm Josh Tardy. I'm a resident of Newport, Maine. I'm a partner at Mitchell Tardy Jackson, and I'm covering for Allison Susi today and testifying on behalf of the Maine Tourism Association. Mr. Chair, you know what our organization is. I've been in front of your committee, and Allison has submitted written testimony. I'll just say at the outset that the association opposes this bill. We agree, and I agree with the testimony of those who have testified against, and I don't want to be duplicative, but I'll just suggest this, Mr. Chair, that the bill, if passed and implemented, would create a very burdensome, overly burdensome procedure, an astonishingly high fine. That's a eye opener. That fine is suggested in this legislation, and it doesn't confer any real substantive rights to an employee. It creates sort of a procedural expectancy, and I agree with the opponents that there is no problem out here that this bill is going to fix. It's assuming a contentious employer-employee relationship. I don't believe that it's a problem that exists throughout our state. I mean, there may be particular anecdotal specific instances, but this sort of one size fits all bill isn't the way to go. I think this committee in past legislatures has contemplated similar proposals, and I would urge the committee to consider an ought not to pass. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Tardy, for your testimony today. Are there any questions? Seeing none. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Take care.
Finally, the last person signed up is Stephen DeMillo.
Hi, good morning. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, and the Labor and Housing Committee. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to me again. I'm here to oppose LD 938. Thank you. We love and support our staff. We accommodate their schedule changes, fairly and diligently, and do everything we do to keep our people happy. Bend over backwards, always have a little more emphasis now with the labor crunch. And I just find that this is unnecessary legislation, and it's definitely going to create more work for managers that are already stressed in this tight labor market. And obviously coming up to this time of year, it's nobody was thinking positively about this in business. So thank you for your time. Any questions, I'm here.
Thank you, Mr. DeMillo. Are there any questions from the committee? Representative Drinkwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. DeMillo, for being here. This bill creates a right of an employee to request a change of schedule. Do you currently deny them that right?
No, we do not. No, people change their schedules all the time. Could be a daycare thing, could be a school conflict with their schedule. We accommodate as we have to.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. DeMillo, for being here again today. He was the last person signed up. Is there anyone else present who wants to testify on this bill? Jen Marvin, you may be promoted to the panelist room for your testimony.
Good morning. Thank you for accommodating me today. I guess I didn't fill out the form properly yesterday. I didn't check the box that said I wanted to testify in person, so I do apologize for that. Senator Hickman, Representative Sylvester, members of the Committee on Housing and Labor, my name is Jean Marvin, and I'm a resident of Scarborough. I'm here to testify in opposition to LD 938, the restrictive scheduling bill. For the past 23 years, I've been the innkeeper at the Nonantum Resort in Kennebunkport. We're a seasonal property. We operate from mid-April to mid-December each year, and we employ about 200 people a season. The Nonantum is an extremely busy property in every sense of the word. We're a 7-acre waterfront location with a home to 109 sleeping rooms, 4 food outlets, activities and events galore. In a given week, we host 2 or 3 weddings, multiple birthday parties, baby showers, bridal showers, corporate meetings, family reunions, you name it. We use a texting system with our staff that allows our staff to trade shifts if they need to. It's called Schedule Fly. And they're all adults. They're happy to assist each other. We don't have scheduling problems. You know, if somebody has a school issue or a daycare issue, or they want to go away for the weekend, they just put up their shift and another employee can pick it up. The proposal that this bill is just simply unreasonable for the hospitality industry in general. Things don't happen, you know, far in advance for us. Nobody works off a schedule. I don't work off a same week schedule. I think the hospitality professionals, we live for the adrenaline rush that's achieved following excitement of doing the impossible. So as you've no doubt heard, there is a critical shortage of people, workers in the state of Maine right now. So I really feel strongly that any employee who's unhappy with the scheduling plan of where they are could easily find another job. There's many properties that would be more than happy to meet their needs. These people are by and large hourly workers, so they're happy and grateful to be able to get more shifts. I would respectfully also remind you that the many hospitality properties in Maine are just barely holding on. We've had a very rough go of it. And to place this sort of undue burden on us I think once again says Maine doesn't want your business. And I really don't think that's what we mean to say. So in order for our state to be a place where people wish to work and live and play, we need to balance the needs of businesses and the needs of workers. And this bill simply is solving a problem that doesn't exist. So I urge you to vote ought not to pass on LD 938, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you for your testimony today. Are there any questions from the committee for Ms. Marvin?
Thank you so much.
And with that, seeing no other people present to testify, I will close the public hearing on LD 938. That concludes our public hearing morning session. It is 11:42. We are scheduled to return at noon for work sessions. We will probably return at 12:15 instead. And for the committee clerk and for anyone listening, we're going to take up work sessions in this order. We will not be hearing, we will not work LD 473 today. Representative Morales's bill has been removed from the schedule. She's working on an amendment. We'll come back to that a different day. We're going to begin with LD 182, move to LD 1240, and then we'll take up the minimum wage bills in the order of their number from 455 to 1279. Then we'll go to LD 824, 581, 225, 654, 773, and 1246. And the committee will decide if we need any breaks in that point or at the discretion of the chair. So with that, I will ask the panelists to close out of this session and enter into the work session link. And that way, on the break, people can go to breakout rooms if they need to caucus briefly again before we return at 12:15. So I see a hand raised. Chairman Sylvester.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if Alyssa, when we get into the work session, could post that schedule in the chat for everybody.
Good idea. So with that, we may see some of you earlier than 12:15, depending upon if you want to do your breakout room caucus, and we'll be back on mic live at 12:15.